Hello, and welcome to episode 82 of Things I Learned from Barry Harris. And today I thought we would talk about how beautiful A minor 7 is. So, for people who are new to the channel, A minor 7 in Barry's world, Barry sees every minor 7 as a major sixth. So, A minor 7 is A minor 7, but it is also C6, same exact chord. So Barry sees A minor 7 as C6, but he sees it coming from the C6 diminished scale, which is it's like a C major scale, but with a flat 6 also. So here's the scale, which means when we build a chord from each degree, we're going to get a C6, a diminished, another C6, another inversion of that first diminished, another C6, another inversion of that diminished, another C6, another inversion of the diminished, another C6. So that's it in drop 2. So now what we have to do as people who are trying to get interested in Barry's system and his logic in looking at harmony, we have to say, okay, well, where can I use this? So you say, okay, well, let's see, there's a couple of places where A minor 7 happens. Let's say we're playing a 1-6-2-5 in C major. So you got the 1 chord, which is, most people look at it as C major 7, A minor 7, there it is right there. Then we got a D minor 7 and G7. So let's do some things in C major, and then so there's an example of using the C6 diminished to end up on D minor 7, or since we're Barry people, we don't think of that as D minor 7, we think of that as F6. So now this is just knowing the C6 scale. And I could have done anything. So we could have said, I could have just done the 6s, which is pretty too. I could have done some of these. These are all beautiful things to do in like drop 2 type of things, which is 4 consecutive strings. Another place where there's an A minor 7 is, let's say, in the key of G. So it's the 2 chord of G. So let's say we're going to go to the 2 chord of G, and let's say after the A minor 7 it goes to D7 back to G. So let's say here's our E7, here's our A minor 7. We'll do the same thing. There was our C6 diminished, and I'm just moving around the scale in drop 2s. So now we've changed our way of looking at A minor 7 as just this one stagnant chord that we can basically do the same things that we normally do, play the same one all the time, to the D7, go to G major. But why do we have to do that? Why can't we do something creative and beautiful every time that A minor 7 comes? And that's a great test to see how well you know the C6 diminished scale. You say, okay, if a C major comes up, I can do these things. If an F major comes up, I can do these things. If that A minor 7 comes up, I can do these things. But what can I do? Okay, well, what things do I practice? So these type of things that I'm looking at are all drop 2. But that means you should also know drop 3, which for guitar players is, so drop 2 is you're playing 4 consecutive strings. Drop 3 is you play a string, skip a string, play 3 strings. Drop 2, drop 4 is play 2 strings, skip a string, play 2 strings. So here's our basic, those are our 3 bigger chords that we can do. But we also have to know it in thirds, we have to know it in sixths, we have to know it in triads, we have to know a bunch of different ways. Now, primarily what we're talking about here is just parallel motion, meaning all the notes are moving in the same direction at the same time. Then there's another kind of motion, which is oblique motion, where one note stays and maybe 2 or 3 or maybe even just one note moves around it.  'That's beautiful. 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 'That's beau Next one. So where would we use something like that? So let's say again in the example of A minor 7, we say here's G major. There it was. Now, I would never in my life have thought to play that if I just thought of that chord as an A minor 7. Never. It's only because I know that that A minor 7 is not just A minor 7. It's actually 4 notes that belong to this scale of chords, which is the C6 diminished scale. Never would I ever thought to play that. Now, another way, we did parallel, we did oblique, and now we have to do contrary. And by the way, for more of these kind of movements and ways to look at this, there's a channel called, I've brought it up a lot, called Labyrinth of Limitations. And Thomas Eccles has really checked all these things out. And you should really look into his channel because it's really fantastic for breaking this stuff apart. So again, the A minor 7, we did parallel motion, which is moving all the notes in the same direction. Then we did oblique motion, which is keeping one note still and moving the notes around it. Then you have contrary motion, which is one note moving in one direction, the other note moving in the other direction, either this way or this way. But they're moving contrary to each other. So then we have things like, here's 3 notes of our scale, or here's 3 more notes going down. So we have to do them at the same time. So we say for one note leads to thirds, leads to triads. So now where would we use something like that? Again, every time there's an A minor 7. So here's G major. There it was. But you see, I would have never in a million years thought to play that if I didn't think of that A minor 7 as coming from a C6 diminished scale. Never. It would just still be the same thing. Same A minor 7. Or even if I wanted to do like little inversions of it, that's fine. But I would never think to do something like that. Let's take this contrary motion a little bit further, because you could do it on any degree. Let's start it on the that's pretty. Let's do that one. That's beautiful. Or maybe let's play more. So instead of playing 3 notes, let's do 5 notes. So down would be this. So if I did it contrary, let's see. So never, ever would I ever think to play something like this. This whole thing, this is so beautiful, but it's because I know that that A minor 7 is part of the C6 diminished scale. And that is, I think, the most important thing to get from this lesson. Every minor 7 is a major 6. So sometimes people say, well, what's the purpose of learning Barry's harmonically now, his 6 diminished scale, or his minor 6 diminished scale, or his dominant 7 diminished scale, or his dominant 7 flat 5 diminished scale? And the only reason you should learn it is to use it. If you're not going to use it, there's no point in learning it. But I think the most important thing is when you start to see the application of it. So if you say to yourself, wait a second, every time I see an A minor 7, I can think this C6 diminished scale. Just imagine all the beautiful things you can do with it. Just imagine all the beautiful things you can do with it. Anything that you can do on the scale that you practice, you then try to put into a song. That's the whole point of it. There's no point in doing anything else except trying to put this stuff in a song. So we can have a million exercises that we practice, but unless and until you see it in an application of a song, it's not going to be that helpful. The thing that I love about Barry's teaching and Barry's method is I've never experienced when he's shown us something where he hasn't immediately put it into a song immediately. So he'll do this whole elaborate thing on a sixth diminished or something really beautiful. What was this one? He did like a really... something like that. So that's a nice one to do, but that's more parallel motion with tenths. Really beautiful stuff. But that's the name of the game. You practice these things so that you can really use them in a song. That's the whole point. If you can't use them in a song, then one of two things are true. Either you haven't practiced it enough, or or maybe you don't believe in it. But see, Barry has made me a believer that A minor 7 is not as important as saying that A minor 7 is C6. And then you start to get into things like we did parallel, we did oblique, and then we did contrary motion. Then there's also borrowing. So for instance, a lot of people play, let's say we're still in G. They'll play this chord, which is nice. And most people would call this A minor 9. But Barry would not. Barry would call this C6. And the note that I'm playing, the B on top, is borrowed from the diminished chord that's right above it. So as most people would play this, it's pretty. But they would call this A minor to A minor 9, back to A minor, and then to D7 with a flat 5 or flat 9 or whatever. Meanwhile, Barry would say this is C6, all these little things I can do on C6. Look, this is just borrowing one note. I could borrow 2 notes. I could borrow 3 notes. That's actually a pretty one. So let's start. Here's G6. 3 notes. So the point of the lesson is C6 diminished scale is greater than A minor 7. So just keep that in mind. C6 diminished scale is greater than A minor 7. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that lesson and of practicing to learn how to really love A minor 7 by seeing it as a chord that's in the C6 diminished scale. Anyway, until next time, thanks.